you're having a good time. So let's see, this is the role of governance in Asia markets, and I'm Abasa Phillips. We will touch on, let's see, the current state of regulations in their various countries, the challenges that they face operating a business in these jurisdictions, and lastly, we will kind of go over what should regulators do to curate the blockchain industries in their various countries. Then we will open it up to Q&A. So I guess we'll do a quick introduction. First, I'm Abasa Phillips. I've been in Japan for 15 years, been involved in the blockchain industry since 2011. Let's see, I come to the blockchain industry from the payment industry. I've run various startups. My latest startup is a company called Zilla. We're a marketplace for token sales. And I'm also the co-chairman of the Blockchain Economy Association of Japan. So, Alex.
Yeah, my name is Alex Shin. I'm the Chief Business Officer and partner at Hashed. We're one of the largest crypto assets fund, accelerator, and community builder out of Korea, and offices in San Francisco. I live in San Francisco. Most of my background is in enterprise, B2B startups. I started my career at a company called DocuSign that just filed for IPO last week.
Congratulations.
I spent some time at Google for Google Maps Earth. I launched several startups. One of them was an anonymous messaging app from Korea to Silicon Valley. It was quite successful. That's what got me into the whole cross-border scene. I've worked with the neighbors and the Kakaos trying to build out bridges between the Bay Area and Korea, and I sort of stumbled onto Ethereum and realized that Korea was really building up speed in that space, so decided to jump in full time.
Great. Bo.
My name is Bo, and I got into a blockchain space in 2013. I invested in Ethereum ICO and ICO of Augur. We co-founded Facton in US, and we did ICO. I followed the whole script of Ethereum, did ICO in 2015. And in 2016, I went back to China and started Wang Technologies. And last year, we started a couple of ICO projects. One of them is Delphy. It's very similar to Augur and the Gnosis. And we are going to launch the product this month on I'm Token. So it's going to be cool.
All right, Josh.
Hi, I'm Josh. I run, co-founded a fund called QCB Capital based in Singapore. We are a quant fund. We also run a large market making and OTC desk. I come from a legal and tech background. Previously, a bunch of companies like Rocket, Gojek, Uber. Fairly active angel investor as well, and got into this space in around 2013, at the same time as Bo. Purely from an investing and trading angle, but it's taken a deeper interest from there.
Mu?
Okay, yeah. So my name is Mu. I'm the co-CEO of Six Network. I run a venture capital fund called 500 Tuk Tuks in Bangkok, Thailand, and also one of the first investor in Omise, OMG, back in 2015. And I run a startup called Ukbi, which is invested by Tencent from China. And we are launching an ICO called Six Network. Yeah, thanks.
Great, and Masa.
Hi everyone. My name is Masa, and I'm kind of working on the post-capitalism society since my current status for over 15 years. And also, I first read the Satoshi Nakamoto's article 2012. So, and instead, I founded a company named OB, provide enterprise-based, distributed ledger technology to the enterprise company in 2012. And recently, I sold my company to SBI Group, just February, also last month. So this moment I completely no title, complete free version. And I think about the new style project actually 1 year later. So yeah, thank you.
Great. So we'll just hop right into it. Let's see. The current state of regulations is quite different in various Asian countries. So I'd kind of like to, I guess, clarify and make sure everyone knows what generally the current state is in their various countries. So let's talk about Korea first, I suppose.
Yeah, I'll do a really quick touch on both. I have 1 foot here in the US in San Francisco, and then 1 foot in Korea. Both countries haven't actually put in an official statement out there on where to place crypto assets as an asset class, except for one state in the US, which is kind of interesting right now. A lot of the stuff you hear about Korean ICO bans and exchange bans are actually an opinion of somebody, not an official statement from the government. I think that's the biggest challenge right now in Korea. All of the entrepreneurs in Korea, even the Kakaos that are doing their own blockchain project, are setting up shop actually here in Japan or setting a shop in Singapore. And that's sort of where the innovation is moving out of the country. But all the money is still sort of floating around in Korea, so that's sort of the state of the business.
So there's not an official statement from the government, but is there sort of an unofficial?
So the Korea market is the penetration is so high. Something like 30% of white-collar employees, people in the country of Korea, are trading crypto. And the current government was placed there because the last government we threw out like 8 months ago. So they're being really careful about making rash statements.
Right.
We're cautiously optimistic that there will be some jurisdiction coming down the pipeline in June, which is after this next wave of elections.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm from China. So China is it's a little bit different from everywhere else. So stability is paramount. Social stability and financial stability is everything. So government right now is like trying to do everything to get rid of risks that will jeopardize stability. So in crypto space, ICO is banned, right? All the things related to ICO is kind of in a no man's space. So all this ICO platforms is gonna dismantled in last year, September 4th, 7 minister level issued a joint statement saying basically ICO is related to illegal fundraising and money laundering. So all these ICO projects raised fund from China at that point has to return money to the investors. So for example, my project, Delphy Foundation, raised 60,000 ethers. And we list the of token DBY on exchanges. And by September 4th, we have to return all these tokens back to the investors. So we basically returned like half of them, and the other half don't want to return the tokens. So that's kind of an issue at that point. That's number one. Number two, all these exchanges are not allowed in China. So all this exchange service, the servers have to move overseas, the business entity have to move overseas, and if you look at all this like big exchanges, they are all blocked in China. So we have to go through VPN to get into big exchanges. For example, Huobi and Gateway.io, they're all based overseas, and that's number two. Number three, all these like market information sites like coin market cap application like this. It's like my token, UI token stuff. They're all banned in China. You cannot operate business like this in China. You have to go overseas. So number four, like all the other things, like for example, you can do like ISO stuff, but you cannot do in public sales. You cannot do in public sales. So all this ISO like fundraising in China is still ongoing, but they're going through like a private sales, like a community fundraising, proxies, and even issue tokens through like exchanges, but not public sales. And because anything public sales, that could jeopardize this kind of like stability. Because if you are losing money or market crashes, all these retail investors, they're gonna come back to the fundraising entities, say, hey, get my money back. How can you lose the money for us? And then that would be a big problem for the government. So for the government, the only thing they care about is like, if you're doing fundraising, you're doing silently, but if there's nothing bad happened, then it's kind of cool. Otherwise, they're gonna come back to you. And we heard a few projects and they're losing money, and the founders escaped, and they have to return all the stuff. So for us, the safe line is this: all the ISO project you did in China, you raised funding in China, the best way is to have all this token in place. Anytime people want to get their money back, to get their token back, you are able to return the money. So that's a safe line for us.
So let me ask you, so you said you guys raised 60,000 Ethereum, which is about I guess if let's say it's let's say $60 million, right?
Right.
About how much of that did you give back?
Like half.
So like $30 million.
Right. You
That's
just
incredible.
Right.
And I noticed that like around September, most of the exchanges moved overseas, but they still have operations in China.
Yes. So for example, like their like a product development, the technology, like this kind of stuff is in China. But the business investment arms, they're all moved overseas. The business entity, they are incorporated overseas. They're not going to do it in China. It's not allowed.
Right.
Yes.
So in a sense, they're sort of outsourcing the development to the company in China.
Exactly.
But
Exactly. It's like even development is also kind of shaky because like government issued a statement saying any business that related to this kind of crypto space, it could be in a shaky place. So for example, so for the Binance, maybe a lot of people heard of Binance. Maybe a lot of people they are not going to claim we're working for Binance. It's kind of anonymous. It's
Right.
kind of distributed, decentralized organization anymore.
Interesting. So, sorry, just to keep on this for a little bit more. There are some Chinese applications with a lot of users that, like, for example, well, I won't mention any names, but sort of like cryptocurrency, they're like portfolio management apps and stuff.
Right.
How do Chinese users actually use those apps then?
Well, so we have to go through VPN, to go through like a great firewall to do this. So the goal of Chinese government is this, like they want to cut off new customers, new monies get into crypto space. If you if you have your token now, so you can do like all these exchanges, go through VPN stuff, but all the new customers, new users, new monies, it's going to be very difficult to get into space because you cannot buy tokens, Ether
Okay.
through RMB.
Right.
And because all this stuff, you can do it, but it's like kind of underground. You have to go through OTC, you have to go through this kind of stuff. But
think-
it's very difficult for like average new users.
Right. The real lesson from this is that I guess Chinese users are very, very good at circumventing regulation.
Wow.
And-
It's called a smart networking, right?
Right. So great. Josh, if you can kind of circle back and I guess tell us the current state of regulations in the countries that you're using.
Sure, I'll take this from a funds perspective. It's what we know best. For us, we're probably the first fully licensed CMS fund out of Singapore that's doing pure crypto. And that's been like pulling teeth, right? It's been really difficult just to get there. I'll tackle it on three fronts. The first is service providers. Second is banking. And the third is really about clarity. Singapore has become a really interesting place for a lot of projects, for funds, for ICOs, for general blockchain applications. And a lot of people are flocking there. A lot of people are running away from where the existing jurisdictions are not friendly. But at the same time, the MAS has not been very clear with what they want to achieve in Singapore. And that's caused a lot of ruckus. And to cut straight to the point, it's for a very simple reason. The Singapore regulator is designed to optimize for income. So that means they'll wait for a larger leading player to drop their regs, and they'll slip in behind with something that's tax friendly and something that's incorporation friendly, and they're just waiting for that to happen. And until that does, everyone's going to be in flux. So I'd say be wary. Like Singapore has a lot of opportunities, but also remember that all FSA, SEC, MAS regulations are retrospective. They always look backwards to trades that are recorded. They always look backwards to what's been done in the past. And so I'd say it's always very important to keep that top of mind.
It's terrifying. So would you say that like would you say that most like for the most part the MAS in Singapore are open at first and then they kind of close up, or?
Yeah, I think every regulator is always going to be wary of floodgates, right? They're very wary of blanket statements. As we know, there's draft regulations in place. There are large institutions in Singapore that are looking to blockchain applications. And that's not uncommon. There are a lot of other friendly governments out there. So I don't think they're trying to do anything to hamper development or growth or fall behind. But at the same time, as should be the case in any jurisdiction, they're looking to protect the retail investor. They're looking to make sure that AML KYC is covered. And we run a relatively large OTC desk, and this is something we deal with on a day-to-day basis. You'll have the occasional client walk in the office with bags of money.
Wow.
It's like, no, go away. We can't deal with this. We literally are not set up for this.
Wait, literal, like real money?
Yeah.
Like real bag of money?
Yeah, like bags of money.
Wow.
Right, and it's just not kosher, right? It's a side of the business that a lot of people don't see. You know, the order books, the invisible order books, the dark pools, the matching and trades that go on behind the scenes off exchange. And a lot of that, unfortunately, is where the true depth and volume in the space is. So you stand on a pretty gray line between, you know, price discovery that takes place on exchange and us being able to market make and control pricing ourselves. So whatever you might think of as true pricing off of, you know, Bitflyer or CoinMarketCap or any of the aggregators is often not backed up by the true volume of fiat that's trying to enter the space. And that's also an issue in Singapore. I mean, that's the third point I made, which is just banking, right? In Singapore, technically, there are no true fiat to crypto exchanges. I mean, there's a couple you may have heard of, but they're not really exchanges. They're more like brokerages. There's no way to go from the Singapore dollar through the banking system onto crypto, right? There are such services where you can call up a guy. He will meet you in like a basement car park. You give him cash. He gives you crypto. And to us, that's like an affront to the idea of a new digital economy. Right? That's not how this is supposed to work.
Right.
It's one of the problems we're trying to solve in the larger block trades in that space. But that to us is really very scary. It's very frothy. We try to stay as far away from those ideas as possible. So everything we try and do at the fund is always going to be extremely compliant.
Right.
And that's the toughest thing to do is sort of self-governance.
Right, definitely.
Until the regs come into place, just pretend that you're being regulated already at the highest level.
Right, right. I'd say that's good advice. Yeah. All right, Mu, if you can kind of touch on Thailand.
Yeah, so I'm from Bangkok, Thailand. Back there, everything is Wild West at the moment. So we actually have only two active, crypto exchange. And the volume itself, there's like bigger one and smaller one. The bigger one, daily volume is less than 10 million US dollars. So that the size is still very, very small.
Right.
And then another one is even smaller. And then there are like few more trying to set it up in the next couple months. And then so far there are like less than 10 local ICOs. Of course, there's no rule, no law. So few of them actually accept fiat money.
Wow.
Yeah, and then they stop doing that because the regulators start looking at them. But that's happening. And then what else? Oh, okay. The thing is like there's one public listed company. They did an ICO back a couple months ago. And then they successfully raised in the local market. And then that when the local SEC stepping in, right? Because you are showing an example of the public company and did an ICO and you're successful. So that's made the government really look into this. And then they are in a hurry to put this law out to the public. So we look at the law itself, and then it was saying that there's two things. They're coming from the tax perspective. So the government say, okay, SEC, you just go out and then have a look into this, then making a good example of like what's going on with that public company. So they talk. And then they say like, okay, there's gonna be personal income tax. They say like 15%. If anyone like putting money in, fiat out, you make profit, you have to pay tax. And then the revenue department say, oh, now I want VAT too. So that's another 7%. So that's in the draft now. And then of course the community themselves is like try to push back. But then that is the progress now. And
so the blockchain community in Thailand, like kind of give us an idea of like the size of it. Is it mostly locals? Is it locals and foreigners, or how does it play out?
Oh, I think it is. Thai is Thai, right? So we use like Thai language. So it's really really local. But of course so there's only two exchanges. So in order to put in the money, you have to go through that exchange, and the volume itself is not that big. So for example, we are launching an ICO. So what we have to do is that like we register a company in Singapore to make sure that okay, at least we have a proper setup. And then we also set another one in Thailand just for the operation. And not that many local crypto investors yet, and most of them. The one who do tend to be a bigger one, trading in the global market. Also, like once they put the money in, they try to trade outside because the local volume is not that big.
So Umise Go was also a Thai and Japanese project.
Yeah.
And how do was there a lot of local participation in that ICO or?
Yeah, so everyone that trade local probably owns some OMG, right?
Right.
So I invest in Omiseco back in 2015. Back then there's like a payment company, and then they do the crypto last year. So yeah, local people they it's like local hero, right? So
Right.
That's why.
I see. Interesting. So Masa, okay, we're gonna flip over to you now. If you can kind of, I guess Yuzo with Bitflyer already kind of went into detail, but if we can touch on it for the sake of this panel, just the overall state of regulations in Japan.
Yeah. Okay. So probably I'm going to discuss. Added the topic here about the 3 points. One is about the taxation issue. Second one is the ICO, and then the third one is probably any kind of related regulation for the blockchain business stuff. So for the first one, Japan is kind of very successful right now for the virtual currency business stuff. Because I founded the JBA with Bitfly and Kraken 4 years ago, and also we closely communicate with the FSA and the METI and as kind of government-related body to purse the virtual currency law in Japan. But also there are also another problem about the consumer taxation stuff for the Bitcoin transaction. Like a dual taxation issue, also the government finally accepted no more dual taxation for the Bitcoin. That's also second achievement. But currently, most people gradually realize that actually the Bitcoin is, or another cryptocurrency is not like actual currency. It's a crypto assets.
Right.
So like an investment perspective stuff. So from that point, at this moment, Japan's taxation actually sucks because then you have to pay the over in the maximum level, you have to pay 55%. It's insane. It's never helped the industry grow up like that way. So we should also closely communicate with the government about we should apply at least around 20% in the taxation stuff from the stock security investment. So that's the things that we most of the Japanese data have to work on right now. And then the other things like an ICO is currently FSA wants to take the ICO approach. Most startups who wants the ICO have to closely communicate with the cryptocurrency exchange. And then I disagree with this approach because probably they want to take the kind of same approach as the IPO market because most of the IPO IT company have to work with the TSE once they want to go to the IPO. But this is a complete, fully centralized approach. Because the starting from the ICO is the starting from the Ethereum, and it's a decentralized fashions. And also the token economy is completely new idea, especially as the most people mentioned. To me, the token economy through the ICO is a combined product model with the virtual currency and the security stuff. So that we should more promote the consumer get involved in, or any kind of business stakeholder get involved in the token economy, especially ICO, even it doesn't matter the B2B or B2C. So from that perspective, consumer protection is a critical element to grow up the industry, but also those issues should be solved by market economy. And then that, the solution to take the market economy solution should be more decentralized fashion. So we should apply more, open a crowdfunding model here.
Right.
So that's why we need more a software technology to secure those kind of ICO token or any kind of token economy building up too.
Right.
And the third one is any other kind of regulation related to the blockchain business stuff. And then, as most people also mentioned, blockchain, the technical potential of the blockchain is actually quite broad. Not about the financial perspective, but also you can apply the IoT, the big data business stuff. So we can, or even internet. Some people working on to democratize the internet from the try to solve the problem about the big five problem. So thinking about the potential of the blockchain, there are a lot of related regulation on the blockchain. See the future of the long term.
Right.
So that's why I strongly recommend that in Japan also we have most of tech startup in the blockchain or in the fintech player built their own lobbying body to closely communicate the government. And I hugely recommend that most of in a startup in any other country should body should organize their own lobbying entity. And they should closely communicate the government to convince them that all the business or technical issue can be solvable in a market economy.
Right.
Yeah.
So congratulations, by the way, you just sold your company
you.
to SBI. And really quickly, could you kind of touch on exactly what Orb did And what sort of challenges did you face in terms of the regulator? How did you work with them to achieve your business?
I see. So, all business perspective is, how to say? So, always working on enterprise permission browsing software business. So our competitor is a Hyperledger, Ripple, and R3 Coder. And then from their perspective, one of the key things about the regulation perspective actually, kind of related to payment stuff. And then we try to help, in the old business model, we try to, a B2B company wants to issue their own token, want to build their own economic zone by themselves, especially in community currency business stuff. And then we provide the software to them. So from their perspective, we actually at that moment try not to touch with the existing regulation law, and then more taking convince government you should more see the economic value of what we are working right now.
Right.
So then and one of the hot topic would be the cashless society in Japan.
Right.
And in Japan is unlike in the U.S., most of the local area, when you go to local area town, you have to use cash, not by credit card, to use some kind of any kind of local shopping restaurant stuff. It's very annoying for the foreigners. So, but that's why I convince the government. But since the payment infrastructure in Japan is relatively expensive than China and the U.S. That's why most of the local merchants cannot accept the digital payment system in local town. So that's why we should apply the blockchain technology here to make the infrastructure cheaper than before.
Right.
So that's more economic incentive for the government and the stakeholder in Japan.
Right.
So yeah, that's what I did in OB. Yeah.
Great. Josh, so you guys set up the first pure crypto fund in Singapore, and you mentioned that was quite difficult in dealing with the MAS and doing that. Can you kind of touch on a couple of challenges that you had?
Sure. I'd say, obviously, the two biggest ones are banking and service providers. Banking in Singapore is a problem. Well, banking anywhere for crypto is a problem, right? You talk to your relationship manager, you're moving volume, you get red flags, right? It's just a fact of life. For us, we have to work with a fail-safe network of 30 different crypto-friendly banks in order to make our investors comfortable, because it's about investor comfort, right? With the fact that any fiat flows, anything that comes on and off exchange, because we're an actively managed fund, is not at risk of being frozen or seized for whatever reason. We've managed to do this by just, cold calling, plowing the field, networking, working as hard as we can to make sure we built that network. But we're really looking forward to some clarity there so that banks can turn around and actually start to offer the fiat flows that will facilitate true blockchain and crypto innovations in Singapore. Right. So banking is one piece. And the second one would be around service providers. And at the end of the day, regulation is not a sexy topic. I'm talking about fund admin, audit, valuation. How do you even peg the valuation in a US denominated fund when there's this much volatility in the marketplace? What time of day is best? How are you going to make sure you show true value to investors? How do you get them to verify your holdings on exchange, off exchange? How do you find a custody provider without regulations that is certified, insured, and what happens if there is a security compromise? All of these are just obstacles that we're working through with the regulators so that we can bring more professionals into the space, more funds into the space. Without institutional participation, the space is going to slowly die out. Right. And that's unfortunately not just siloed to Singapore. I mean, at the end of the day, this market's going to be led by what happens in China and Korea and Japan.
Right.
I'm no expert on what's happening there, but we obviously keep our finger on the pulse. And our fund view is that China will liberalize in the long run, right? That's 6 to 9 months or longer. The real issue around it is if you have a crypto asset in a country that desperately wants to further integrate with the global economy, take the renminbi into an international space, there's no reason for them to suppress it any further. It's only going to cause more talent to leave the space, more projects to leave their home borders. So it's fundamental that down the line, something like a digital renminbi, right?
Right.
A digital national currency is going to come in to help tame volatility. For an actively traded fund, that's something we look for so that we can deal with volatility in the space. It's only useful to them if it's useful in the One Belt, One Road initiative, right? And as China grows and expands its influence further, I think cryptocurrencies are going to become a core part of that strategy. So we remain bullish that it will go in that direction. It's just a matter of when, because there's still a lot of conflicting views from regulators that in the abstract cannot agree on one thing or another. And China's still the 800-pound gorilla in the room
Right, oh,
here.
definitely, yeah. So let's pretend everybody here in the audience is a regulator. What would you tell them? Let's go through and say, what do you think they should do to, I guess, foster and curate their blockchain industries?
Sure. I'd say the biggest guarantee that you can give to the space is to make sure that there's a balance of consumer protection and tax exemptions. These are two things that we care about the most. In the institutional investor space, we want to bring in accredited investors that know what they're doing, understand the risks, but can also benchmark against what the rest of the marketplace is doing. And if the marketplace doesn't know who to follow because there's still no clarity, they're always going to look outside their borders for guidance. And if the tax space is only going to look to drive revenue for the government because they see it as an easy cash grab, it's never going to foster the kind of growth that an innovative product like any blockchain application could bring to market. And the scary thing about this is, look in Japan, you got the 55% threshold. Obviously, that's at a very high level. But if you start making products like crypto non-tax exempt, you leave out the institutional investor.
Right.
And fundamentally, we need to make sure that our block or our industry is represented as a block.
Gotcha.
Going one-to-one and trying to interface with the regulator on your own is a bad idea. I think associating, organizing, and making sure that we work together to represent our interests is important.
Okay. Moo, like, what would you say, you're about to start an ICO, and let's say you're talking to the regulators in Thailand. What's your best case scenario? What advice would you give them on how to regulate the blockchain industry in Thailand?
Yeah, so let's talk about from the VC hat, for example. So I run a VC, a seed fund.
Okay.
So we invest like 50 companies, like seed level. So my ticket size like it's 500 startup, right? So our ticket size is like 150, 200, 300. So for local startup ecosystem in a country like Thailand, right? There's not so many investor who gonna take whatever after Series B.
Right.
Yeah, no way locally. So my startup, for example, I launched my company back in 2012, and then I'm the first like startup in Thailand that raised money. So I always have to come out and look for money outside of Thailand.
Right.
Because every time I try to raise, right, the money that I want to raise is bigger than the fund size. Like so
Right.
because like the industry itself is always far behind. So I have to come to Japan, so I raise from like Transcosmos, and then I go to China, raise from Tencent. So it's happening like this. But look at all the ecosystem, right? If there are like 50 companies in Thailand, for example,
Right.
chance ICO gonna help them. Even they don't have to come out this far to talk to strategic investor. How about if there's not strategic, right? They just want money and focusing on that project. So I guess ICO is gonna help in that scenarios. So if I talk to the government, that's probably much more important than this small tax they try to get from this like the ICO money. You can multiply the whole Thai startup ICO and tax it like 15-30%.
Right.
That's not gonna make any change
Right.
to the country.
Right.
Just let it go for at least for the next couple years and see what happens. That's what I recommend, I think. So at least there will be more startup that can raise bigger money so they can grow. Yeah.
Okay, great. We're running a little bit low on time, so why don't I open it up to Q&A to the audience. If any of you guys have questions, feel free to pose them. Okay, over there.
Can you hear me?
Hi.
Hi. From a retail investor perspective, more on the landscape of the ICOs, how do you see that evolving with the regulations varying from country to country as far as crowd gifting, bounties, and that sort of direction. I'd just like to hear your perspective on that.
Right. So okay. So the question is, with ICOs, they're worldwide, right? But different regulators have different regulations, and how, as an ICO, do you navigate that? Anyone would like?
I'll try to tackle a portion of that. So unfortunately in the US, some old jurisdiction states that to be an accredited investor, you have to have a net worth of $1 million or $2 million and break 250K annual salary. And for some reason, in that economic class, now you're worthy to invest, and everybody else is not. So I'm not sure when that's going to change, and we're hoping that that's probably going to take a really long time. In Korea, however, I think the public investors are still really, really involved. And I'm sure you're seeing it in Japan as well. We're seeing a lot of syndicates coming up. At this stage, we don't think the regulatory environment for that's going to change a lot. So unfortunately for retail investors, it's going to start localizing into specific jurisdictions that don't quite cover that area. I think the US, it's been a long time since I've heard about any sort of public fundraising there.
Right.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Yeah, Bo.
Yeah, so in China, we are saying this like ISO project is it's all over the place, and they start from like basically they're going overseas, but it's still the investors mostly come from China. What they are doing is this: they add a new layer of like, for example, know your customer KYC check, and all these investors in China, they are doing basically private sale. They are go through the WeChat community, and they are going through the proxy, and those people are using, like, for example, fake passport. You can buy a fake passport from like Taobao for like 5 or 10 yuan, and then submit to the KYC. And everything, all the procedure is legal. It's legal. You get all this passport from Russia, from Ukraine, from like even like right. So all these places, but it's still the KYC is right, and the money is coming from like everywhere, right? So because of this kind of like identity is different from the money, right? So that will give like all these levies for ISO in China. In the meantime, I mean, a lot of projects basically is using a lot of like innovative way of doing it, right? So right now, the current popular way to do it is like this. So you have a project and you take it to the crypto fund and say, if your crypto fund can say, hey, we can take this stuff, and then we don't want to do any private sale or even public sale at all. So we a few funds, and then we can take all these tokens by ourselves, and then take this fund and list it to the exchange, and then on the exchange, then that's kind of a public sale now. So if you do a good marketing, a lot of people are interested in this project, and then that's good stuff for another way of ICO. So in this case, yeah, exactly.
Right,
so regulators, you can do only so much, and there are so many projects. Or the executives, I mean, branch is has limited resource. On the other hand, like central government and local government have different way of looking at the ICO stuff. A lot of local government, say for example Hangzhou City, because of Alibaba is out there. At the very beginning, Alipay is illegal. But later on, Alipay becomes a huge monster, and the huge revenue for contribution to Hangzhou City. So right now, they look at ICO is different now. Maybe crypto space can provide another layer of like revenue for local government. So, like central government maybe have different policies, but in business communities they are different, right? And the local government, they have different implementation policies out there. So you see, regulation can be different at a different place at a different time.
Great.
That's in China.
Thanks. We get another question? Okay, here in the front.
Thank you. So you've got a number of different countries sort of represented on the panel up there. Is there much collaboration or interactions, do you think, between the different regulators of the different countries, either informally or formally?
At least from Korea's perspective, I think we're just kind of waiting. Typically, they'll see what the SEC in the US will do, and it kind of follow suit. And I think the Singapore idea is pretty interesting as well. Like once everything solidifies, there's going to be a little bit of tax break, and they kind of come in their own way. So unfortunately, it's everybody's sort of kind of paying attention. I actually spoke with the deputy director for Japan on sort of what they're doing as well. And they're also sort of kind of waiting to see what the SEC and the commodities exchange in the US will kind of settle down, which at this moment is not looking super promising, but we'll see.
I think there are some countries that are a bit more trigger friendly than others, trigger happy. So I know for a fact that the Filipino regulator has spent time here in Japan with the Japanese regulator. Japan is seen as thought leadership in this space. I do know of a couple of Indonesian and Thai representatives that have also come to Korea and Japan to seek that sort of early guidance, but it's really early days. And government collaboration or regulation is a whole different can of worms. It's a lot of waiting in hallways and missed meetings and power distance. I wouldn't rely on any one expert to tell you that this is how it's going to go in this country or another. I think the best way is to sort of play the field and look to the big boys and just China, Korea, Japan. Just keep tabs on those and you'll have a pretty good view of what's going to happen next.
Thank you. Is there another question? There was one back there I saw a moment ago. Here, okay.
Thank you. Interesting discussion. What's your view on the upcoming countries or states like Gibraltar, Estonia, Malta, BVI, all starting to, these smaller, Singapore could probably be included in that because geographically it's similar size, but they're coming in and saying we're going to be the blockchain or the cryptocurrency capital or city of choice because we're pro regulation, pro actively putting in frameworks to support these, and we're starting to see some movement into these territories. Do you have a view on that and whether that will support the acceleration of the bigger players like the US and China and Korea, etc., in terms of watching and observing and applying?
Thank you. So, yeah, how do you feel about Gibraltar, Malta, and these other jurisdictions?
Yeah, we see this coming. So if you look at China, there are so many projects, thousands of ICO projects. Once they did the ICO, they have to move they have to incorporate outside of China. So right now it's like Singapore, Tokyo, Bangkok, and Malta has become the hub for Chinese companies. And that's just the start. That's just starting space, starting point. Even you go to a place like Tokyo or Singapore, you still have to do all the regulation stuff. And it's even more difficult because in China, it's like, okay, it's banned and you cannot do it, that's it. But in Singapore, nobody knows what to do. I mean, we've been talking to MAS lawyers like CPS and all the time. And we do have companies, projects that have done this like regulation approval process for 3 times. They have set up like 30+ companies just for this stuff. It's difficult. And we saw a lot of stuff like this happening. And for example, in Singapore, for the non-profit organizations, we have to do this final auditing once every year. So for us, the deadline is the end of July. We do, and it's very difficult for us to how can we put all this raised fund either getting into the books, and do we have to pay tax? How do we pay tax? How do we auditing every expenditures, every expense to it? So as you said, a lot of places wants to be the hub of the crypto space, but it's so difficult. It's so hard to get all these pieces of law and in place. For example, we've been to Russia and they're trying to get all this crypto law in place in June. They're trying to move all these Chinese miners into Russia. But it's difficult. It's difficult to do because to change the law and to change all the enforcement, and it takes time.
Great. I think we could squeeze one quick one in. How about over there in the front?
Okay, so blockchain-based cryptocurrencies are a fundamentally new way of approaching money and banking. At the moment, they're not being implemented too widely, so you can't go and buy things in any store with cryptocurrency. But once they are, wouldn't that threaten the way traditional commercial banks operate, and how would the government and regulators deal with that? Because in many countries, governments closely cooperate and partner with large commercial banks.
Okay, I'll let Alex, why don't you take that?
I think we're still a whiles out from seeing cryptocurrency being used as a form of money. I mean, there's probably 20 stablecoin projects out there, right? We're fairly, in the US, I think we still think that cryptocurrency is going to be pegged to a different crypto like USDT and see how that works. In Asia, we're again cautiously optimistic that maybe an entire nation, their jurisdiction, will peg cryptocurrency prices to their national currency, right? Especially in countries that don't have huge cash regulation anyways. And that's when that trigger is going to happen. Outside of that, I don't know about the bank's relationships and the retail businesses, but the only places I've seen are like Korean restaurants and you know, bars in San Francisco that take Bitcoin, right? And unfortunately, I think that's going to be the way for at least the foreseeable future.
All right. Masa, I'll let you take a bit.
Let me add one thing. So I think we can think about that issue from the analogy of the internet. So what's going to happen in the internet is like, you know, before the internet, TV was a major, you know, media technology. And at that moment, most of the confliction happening through in the media is that most of the artists or creator wants to create their own contents and distribute to the consumer side. There is a huge filter in a TV industry, like, you know, I don't know, like agencies or like, you know, advertisers or TV broadcasting companies itself too. But, you know, most of the internet player like YouTube or Instagram, you know, erase those filter from the market. You know, instead they build the platform that most of people can create their own contents or distribute contents to the consumer side in a free way. And then now blockchain bring that kind of, you know, disruption in the finance world. The things like, you know, that's why, you know, most of the bank and credit company have to be facing the kind of issue in the long term. The only, you know, way they can, you know, survive in long term is that they have to, you know, since they are in an innovation dilemma, so like, you know, they have to adapt a new, you know, business model or not. And then Netflix or like, you know, Hulu is a good example why in the internet, because they created own like a content distribution network leveraging internet, so more like a professional way, more like a consumer, not like a CZM way. So, you know, the commercial bank or, you know, security company can invent that way by themselves, they can survive.
Right. Great. Well, I'd like to thank the panelists and thank the audience. We're out of time. Why don't we continue this discussion on a one-on-one basis during the break? But thank you very much. I hope you guys enjoy the rest of the day. Take care.